Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. On my 60th birthday, I thought I was going out to lunch, maybe the kind with laughter, candles, and the kind of small talk mothers live for. I wore my soft blue sweater, the one my late husband once said made my eyes look like the ocean, and even curled my hair for the first time in months. But instead of cake, I was handed a suitcase and abandoned. That was just the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it wears your last name. Stick around till the end and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this one might change the way you look at family. They say a mother's love is unconditional, patient, forgiving, eternal. I believed that once. I lived that. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer. My whole life revolved around one boy, my son, Nathan. That morning I woke up with hope. Not the loud, foolish kind, but the quiet kind that trembles beneath your ribs, the kind that says, maybe this year will be different. I made pancakes, his favorite, and set 2 plates like I used to when he was a teenager sneaking back home after curfew. By noon, there was no knock, no call, not even a text. My heart sank, but I refused to spiral. He's busy, I told myself. He'll come. At 1:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there he was, Nathan, in a crisp gray jacket, holding a grocery store bouquet. That same smile that used to melt me when he was little. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, voice warm but hurried. I smiled through the sting in my chest and hugged him. "You came." "Of course," he said, pulling away too quickly. "Come on, let's go." I made reservations. I didn't question a thing. I grabbed my purse, my cardigan, and those painful but pretty shoes I always saved for special days. I felt like a girl again, like maybe the years hadn't turned my heart into something heavy. We didn't drive toward the city. We drove past it, down a long road lined with maple trees, shedding gold and crimson. The sign came into view just as my stomach twisted. Cedar Vale Retirement Home. I laughed, assuming it was a mistake. "Nathan, this is a care facility." He didn't look at me. "Mom, we need to talk." "What's going on?" He exhaled, like I was a burden he'd been rehearsing to let go of. "You've been forgetting things. The neighbors called me twice last month. You left the stove on. You live alone. It's not safe." "What are you talking about?" I snapped. "I left a kettle boiling once." "This isn't healthy," he said gently, like pity was an act of mercy. "I found a place that can help. They have activities, care, other people your age. You brought me here," I whispered, voice breaking. "On my birthday." He stepped out of the car and opened the trunk. My breath caught. My suitcase was already packed. "You went through my things?" "Mom," he said, eyes narrowing. "Please don't make this harder." The words fell like stones. Inside, Cedar Vale smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. Smiling nurses greeted him by name. Papers were already prepared, a stack of legal forms bearing his signature. He slid a document across the counter power of attorney and said, "It's done." I didn't cry then. Not yet. They led me to a small beige room with an adjustable bed, a nightstand, and a window that faced a brick wall. My birthday gift. When he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, coat still on, staring at the wilting bouquet. The flowers looked like I felt half alive, already fading. That night, I lay awake, listening to the shuffle of nurses and the hum of distant TVs. The mattress was too firm, the air too sterile. I replayed every moment of my life with Nathan, the scraped knees, the college bills, the excuses, the quiet sacrifices that only mothers remember. And somewhere in the darkness, something inside me cracked. The next morning, I asked for my cell phone. The nurse smiled. "Your son said it was confusing for you. He took care of it." Confusing. That was when I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. But I wasn't as fragile as they thought. Not even close. I stopped eating for 2 days. Not to protest, I simply couldn't swallow the bitterness that came with every bite. The nurses called me sweetheart, honey, like a child too old to understand. They didn't know I was plotting. The world may have forgotten who Eleanor Voss was, but I hadn't. By the 4th day, I met someone who reminded me that forgotten doesn't mean finished. Her name was Maya, a young nurse with tired eyes and a kindness that didn't pity. She leaned close while checking my vitals and whispered, "You don't belong here." He blinked, startled. she smiled softly. "I've seen lost people. You're not one of them." And in that moment, the first spark of rebellion returned to my heart. Maya had a way of speaking that made even the harsh fluorescent lights feel warmer. That afternoon, she stayed a few extra minutes during her rounds. "So what did you do before all this?" she asked, tilting her head as she cleaned the monitor beside my bed. "I taught English," I said, surprised by the sound of my own voice. It felt strange to speak about a life that no longer seemed mine. 32 years at Ashwood High. I retired early to take care of my husband when he got sick. Maya nodded, thoughtful. "You look like the kind of woman who kept everyone else's stories alive. Maybe it's time you wrote your own." That line stayed with me long after she left. In Cedar Vale, time didn't move forward. It looped. Breakfast at 7, activities at 10, lunch at 12, silence at 3. The same faces stared out at the same TV. The same hollow laughter echoed down the hall. People here weren't living, they were waiting. But I refused to wait for oblivion. I kept my mind sharp, reading whatever I could find. I borrowed puzzles from the rec room and solved them twice, just to remind myself I still could. And every night, when the hall lights dimmed, I whispered my husband's name like a prayer. "Richard, give me a way out." On the fourth night, Maya returned after her shift, glancing down the hallway before slipping into my room. In her hand, she held something small folded, yellowed, tucked between her fingers. "This belonged to a patient who passed last week," she said, voice low. "We found it in his Bible. No family to claim it." I frowned. "What is it?" She smiled, a flicker of mischief behind her fatigue. "A lottery ticket. 2 weeks old. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe the universe owes you something." I chuckled, the sound brittle and strange. "The universe and I stopped speaking years ago." "Then maybe it's time you called first," she said, pressing the ticket into my hand. That night, I sat alone in the small lounge, the ancient desktop computer humming like a relic of another century. I typed in the numbers. For a moment, I thought I'd read it wrong. Then I read it again. And again. $11 million. My knees went weak. The fluorescent light above flickered as if the world itself had blinked in disbelief. It wasn't joy I felt, not even close. It was fear. Because I knew what would happen if Nathan ever found out. I printed the confirmation quietly, folded it into a square, and tucked it inside the hem of my pillowcase. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely breathe. The next morning, I pulled Maya aside near the supply closet. "I need to speak to someone, privately. Someone who won't go running to my son." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "There's a man who volunteers here twice a month. A lawyer. He helps residents with wills and things. I'll make sure you see him." That Friday, the man arrived, tall, young, calm-eyed. Dr. Kellen Pierce. He didn't wear a suit, just a clean shirt and a quiet confidence that put me at ease. We met in the tiny staff break room with the hum of a vending machine behind us. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Voss?" he asked. I unfolded the paper slowly and slid it across the table. "Can you help me disappear?" He read it once, raised an eyebrow, but didn't laugh. "Then we'll have to move quickly." For the next few hours, he guided me through the impossible. Forms, signatures, notarizations, financial transfers, legal blind spots. He spoke in terms like trusts and anonymous beneficiaries and new identities. I didn't understand half of it, but I understood the most important part: my name would vanish. By the time he left, I had a new prepaid phone, a new mailing address under a trust name, and the smallest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: control. That night, Maya came to say goodbye. "You'll be safe out there?" she asked. I nodded. "I'll find a way to be more than safe." She hugged me tightly. "Don't forget us when you're free." "I won't," I whispered. Just before dawn, I walked out of Cedar Vale wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a duffel bag that barely zipped. The air outside was sharp and wet, filled with the scent of pine. I turned once to look back at the building, the place my son had left me to die slowly, and then kept walking. I didn't cry. I didn't look back again. They thought I was confused. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was finished. But I was about to become a ghost, with $11 million. Let them look for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus rolled through the Appalachian foothills, its windows fogged with the breath of a dozen silent passengers. I sat near the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching the duffel that held my entire life. One set of clothes, a notebook, my birth certificate, and the printed lottery confirmation tucked in a worn envelope. $11 million, the number pulsed in my head like a heartbeat I didn't trust. When the bus crossed into North Carolina, I finally exhaled. The morning light spilled over the mountains like something alive, and for a fleeting second, I felt almost free. Kellen had arranged everything. A small house in the outskirts of Ashwood Falls, population barely 2,000, a place so quiet it didn't even echo. The kind of town where everyone minded their own business and the mailman waved from the same route every morning. The house itself was modest, a one-story brick home with peeling paint, a crooked fence, and the smell of damp pine needles after rain. But it was mine. No one else knew I existed there. No one except Kellen and Maya. The first night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair by the front window, the glow from the street lamp painting thin stripes across the floor. I kept expecting a knock at the door, Nathan's voice, that familiar tone halfway between charm and command. But all I heard was the wind pressing softly against the glass. Freedom, I discovered, isn't peace. It's raw and loud and full of ghosts. The next morning, I walked to the small store at the corner, pretending to be just another aging woman buying bread and milk. The cashier smiled politely. No one knew my name. The anonymity was both a comfort and a wound. I spent the first week learning to live again, cooking small meals, taking short walks before dusk, checking the mail twice a day even though nothing came. Every sound outside a truck engine, a door slam made my pulse spike. On the 7th day, I turned on my old laptop and created a new identity. Helen Vaughn, 60, widowed, retired teacher from Charlotte. That was me now. Helen had no son, no husband's grave, no history. But as the quiet grew heavier, I found myself scrolling through social media with trembling fingers. I made a fake account and searched his name, Nathan Voss. And there he was smiling in a photo, holding a microphone at a charity gala, all perfect posture and practiced sincerity. His caption read, "If anyone has seen my mother, please contact me or the Ashwood County Police. She's been missing for a week. We're desperate to find her." Beneath it, hundreds of comments poured in. "Praying for you. Such a devoted son. What a good man." I laughed loud and ugly until my chest hurt. They had no idea. But what broke me wasn't the lie. It was the photo he used. An old picture from 5 years ago. My birthday. He had his arm around me, our faces pressed together, smiling like nothing could ever touch us. The illusion of love captured forever and weaponized. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling, and stared at that image on the screen until it blurred. Every sacrifice, every forgiveness, every maybe next time I'd ever whispered came rushing back. He had used my love like currency, and I'd kept paying, thinking it was devotion. By the second week, I stopped hiding from my anger. I wrote lists, names, dates, loans, every lie he'd ever told me. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I could feel it forming, sharp and deliberate, like a weapon taking shape in my hands. Then, one afternoon, the mail came. Among the utility bills and advertisements was an envelope with no return address. The paper was heavy, expensive, too deliberate to be random. Inside was a photocopy, my signature, my late husband's, Nathan's. It was a loan agreement dated 12 years ago. I froze. I'd never seen it before, but I recognized my own handwriting. Perfect, too perfect. Every loop, every slant. It was forged. I tore through my folder of old documents. Kellen had helped me save mortgage records, insurance papers, tax forms. There were 3 more with the same perfect forgery. And with each discovery, the truth unspooled. Nathan had been stealing from us for years. All those unexplained debts, the missing funds, the quiet tension before my husband died. I thought grief had made me forgetful, but it wasn't memory loss, it was manipulation. Nathan hadn't just abandoned me. He'd built his success on my name. That night, I sat at my desk with the forged papers spread around me. I wasn't crying. I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before something irreversible. I picked up my phone and called Kellen. "I found proof," I said. "Proof of what?" "My son," I whispered. "He's been stealing from me for over a decade." Kellen didn't sound surprised. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet." I stared at the documents. I want him to feel what it's like to be powerless first. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, he said, "Then let's make him wonder if you know." And for the first time since my husband's funeral, I smiled. I spent the next 3 days inside the house, surrounded by evidence and ghosts. Every paper I uncovered told a story I had been too blind or too trusting to see. Nathan had forged loan agreements, withdrawn funds under my husband's name years after he died, and even used my own social security number to open new accounts. The more I read, the more the truth sank like stones into my chest. He hadn't made one mistake. He had built an entire empire of deceit. Kellen came by one evening, carrying a thermos of coffee and a small black folder. He laid it on the table without a word. Inside were screenshots, email records, and wire transfer data, things he had dug up through legal channels and quiet favors. "Your son has been under federal review for 6 months, he said softly. "Tax evasion, identity theft, shell companies. You're not the only victim." I sat back, staring at the folder as the room tilted. "How long have they known?" "Long enough," he replied. "But not enough to bring it down. Not yet." The flames from the fireplace danced across his face, throwing shadows that made him look older, tired. "If you go public," he warned, "you'll lose your anonymity. But if you stay quiet—" "I'm not going to stay quiet," I said. "Not anymore." He smiled faintly, as if he'd expected nothing less. That night, I began my own version of justice. I scanned every document, uploaded each one to an encrypted drive, labeled them with precise dates. I recorded voice notes not because I feared forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to outlive me if anything happened. When I was finished, I printed a clean copy of everything and sealed it in a large manila envelope. I wrote on the front in steady block letters, "To be opened if I disappear." I mailed it to the Department of Justice. No return address, just truth in an envelope. The next few days blurred into cautious routine. I started taking walks in the mornings, always different routes, always checking over my shoulder. The mountain air carried a strange peace, crisp and wild. But peace can make you paranoid when you've lived in chaos too long. One morning, I noticed a dark sedan parked 2 houses down. No plates on the front. It stayed for hours. The next day, another car, same color, different driver, idled for 10 minutes before pulling away. Kellen had warned me this might happen. "If he suspects you know something," he'd said, "he'll send someone. Not to hurt you yet, but to scare you, to make you run." But I didn't run. If Nathan wanted me scared, he'd have to work harder. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote him a letter. No return address, no signature, just a single line written in neat cursive. "I know what you did, and I'm not done yet." I mailed it to his office first thing in the morning. By evening, the car outside was gone. For the first time in weeks, I slept. When I woke, sunlight poured through the window, spilling gold across the floor. For a brief, dangerous moment, I let myself imagine a world where I could forgive him, a world where my son had made one bad choice and regretted it. But forgiveness is a luxury you can't afford when the person you love is still holding the knife. 2 weeks later, the courthouse envelope arrived. Official letterhead, stamped with the Ashwood County seal. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Petition to declare mental incompetence. Eleanor Voss. My name, typed in cold black ink, beneath Nathan's signature. He'd done it. He was trying to erase me again, this time legally. The document claimed I was delusional, paranoid, incapable of managing my affairs. Attached were affidavits from 2 witnesses, a former neighbor and one of his business partners, both stating that I had been confused and erratic in the months before my disappearance. The coup de grace was a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met, diagnosing me with cognitive decline and disordered thinking. Nathan's manipulation was meticulous, ruthless, perfect. For an hour, I sat motionless, staring at my name beneath words like unstable and incompetent. Then I stood up, tore the papers in half, and said aloud, "If it's war he wants, he's chosen the wrong woman to bury." Kellen arrived that night after one terse phone call. He read through the documents quietly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked at me and said, "We'll fight this, but you have to stay calm. They're counting on panic." "I've lived with panic," I said. "It doesn't scare me anymore." The next morning, he brought in a specialist, Dr. Lila Harrow, a psychiatrist from Raleigh known for her integrity. She spent 3 hours with me in the kitchen, sipping tea, asking about my childhood, my marriage, my years teaching literature. At one point, she said, "You seem remarkably grounded for someone accused of losing her mind." I smiled. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting love in return. I stopped doing that. When she left, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You'll win this." I believed her. The hearing was set for 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prove I wasn't crazy. 2 weeks to remind my son that the woman he tried to erase had been the one who taught him how to fight. The courthouse in Ashwood Falls wasn't grand or imposing like the ones you see in movies. It was small, pale brick, a clock tower that hadn't worked in years, and hallways that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. But that morning, as I stood outside its doors, it felt like the center of the world. I wore a navy blue coat, silver buttons, and my late husband's old watch, the one I hadn't taken off since the day Nathan tried to erase me. I told myself that if I could survive being abandoned, confined, and betrayed, I could survive this too. Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Reporters had caught wind of the missing mother case. Nathan sat at the front beside his attorney, all polished confidence and practiced sorrow. He even rose when I entered, that same faint smile, the one that had fooled me for 30 years. He mouthed, "Mom," like I was still his. The judge, an older man with deep-set eyes, adjusted his glasses. "This hearing concerns the matter of Eleanor Voss and the petition for legal guardianship filed by her son, Mr. Nathan Voss." Guardianship. What a polite word for imprisonment. Nathan's lawyer went first. A tall, expensive man with a voice that could charm an audience into applauding a lie. He painted a picture of concern. A mother suffering from confusion, delusion, isolation. He described a woman who'd vanished under mysterious circumstances, who was being manipulated by outside influences. "Mr. Voss fears for his mother's safety," he concluded solemnly. "He only wishes to ensure her well-being and financial stability." Every word twisted the knife deeper. Then came the recordings, old voicemails Nathan had spliced together, pieces of messages I'd left during lonely nights, edited to make me sound hysterical. "Nathan, please call me back," one clip said, my voice breaking. "I don't know what's happening." The courtroom went silent. When the lawyer sat down, Nathan stood. His performance was flawless. He looked straight at the judge, eyes glistening. "I love my mother. This isn't about money or power. It's about making sure she's safe. She's all I have left." For a moment, the mask almost worked. I saw people in the audience nodding. The judge's face softened slightly. Then it was my turn. I stood, steadying myself against the table, and said, "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge nodded. Briefly, I walked to the stand, feeling every pair of eyes follow me, the reporters, the spectators, even Nathan, whose smile faltered for the first time. I didn't look at him, not yet. "My name is Eleanor Voss," I began. "I am 60 years old. I taught high school English for over 3 decades. I raised one son, and I did it alone after losing my husband. I am not incompetent. I am not delusional. I am not confused." I handed the clerk a folder, Dr. Harrow's signed psychiatric evaluation, dated 3 days prior. "Here is a professional assessment stating that I am mentally and emotionally sound. You'll also find financial records showing that every withdrawal, every trust transfer was done legally by me." The judge flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. I turned toward Nathan. "You say you love me, but you took my phone, my home, and my freedom. You forged my signature. You left me in a place meant for the forgotten. And when that didn't silence me, you tried to brand me insane." A ripple moved through the room. Nathan's lawyer started to rise, but the judge lifted a hand. "Let her speak." I took a breath and continued. "Your Honor, I have evidence of multiple forged financial documents, all bearing my name and my late husband's. I'm not presenting them today, not yet, but I will, if I must." Then I looked directly at my son for the first time. I used to tell my students that words have power. I never imagined I'd have to use mine to defend the truth from my own child. Nathan's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. The judge cleared his throat. "Given these developments, I'll need time to review all the materials and the medical report. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. As the gavel struck, the room erupted in whispers. Nathan turned, his mask cracking at the edges. His eyes found mine cold now, not pleading. He leaned close enough for me to hear the venom in his whisper. "This isn't over." I smiled, just barely. "You're right," I said softly. "It's only beginning." Outside, the air smelled of rain and old stone. Kellen was waiting by the courthouse steps. "You were magnificent," he said. I was angry. I corrected. "There's a difference." He handed me a small envelope. "Federal mail came for you this morning." Inside was a single-sheet confirmation that my anonymous packet had been received and forwarded to the Department of Justice's Financial Crimes Division. No signature, no details. Just one sentence. "Your submission is under review." As I folded the letter, I realized that Nathan wasn't the only one playing chess anymore. He'd built his empire on forged paper and charm. But I had something he'd never understand: truth, patience, and time. 2 weeks until the next hearing. 2 weeks until the world saw who he really was. I turned to Kellen and said, "Let's make sure the next time I walk into that courtroom, he's the one on trial." Those 2 weeks stretched like a second lifetime. Nathan's face was everywhere: news articles, interviews, sympathy posts. "Concerned son pleads for justice." The press called it the vanishing mother case, and every word of it burned. They painted me as unstable, confused, possibly manipulated by unseen forces. He was playing the victim, and people believed him. Again, I watched the reports from my kitchen, sipping tea to steady the tremor in my hands. Each segment ended with the same photo: me and Nathan smiling, frozen in that old illusion of love. The reporters spoke in hushed tones, as if I were already gone. I turned off the TV. I wasn't gone. I was getting ready. Kellen came by every evening with updates. He worked quietly but efficiently, building the kind of defense that didn't just protect me, it cornered Nathan. "The DOJ file's been flagged," he told me one night, setting down his laptop. "It's moving up the chain faster than expected. Someone's paying attention." "That's good," I said, though my stomach clenched at the thought. He hesitated. "It also means they might reach out to him first, to verify details. He'll know he's under scrutiny." "Good," I said again, voice steady. "Let him feel the ground shift." Still, there were moments when I faltered. Late at night, I'd catch myself wondering if there was a version of him, a smaller, gentler version, still inside the man who'd done all this. The boy who used to leave drawings under my pillow. The teenager who cried at his father's funeral. But that boy was gone. Maybe he never existed. One evening, I sat at the desk by the window, watching the lights of Ashwood Falls shimmer through the mist. I opened my notebook, the one I'd been filling with notes, memories, dates, and began to write a letter. Not to Nathan, but to myself. Remember this feeling, the silence after truth, the calm before justice. Do not confuse love with loyalty, and do not confuse blood with family. The next morning, Kellen brought news. A reporter's reached out, someone from the Chronicle. "They've been investigating financial exploitation of seniors. They want your story." "No names," I said immediately. "Not yet, but they can have the truth." He nodded. "Anonymous it is." We met the journalist, Sarah Keene, in a small cafe 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, and the kind of gray coat that made me disappear into crowds. Sarah was kind, curious, sharp, and too perceptive for comfort. She asked about Cedar Vale, about the power of attorney, about my sudden disappearance. "I don't want pity," I told her. "I want awareness." Her pen froze mid-sentence. "Then let's give it to them." The article came out 3 days later. The Silenced. How families erase the voices of their elders. It didn't name me, but the story was unmistakably mine, a retired teacher, betrayed by her son, stripped of her independence. The tone was raw, defiant, real, and it hit like a storm. Social media erupted. People questioned the narrative. The sympathy that had cocooned Nathan began to unravel. Why isn't the mother's side being heard? How did he get power of attorney without consent? This doesn't add up. The tide was turning. 2 nights later, Kellen called. The Department of Justice opened an active investigation into Voss Enterprises. They've subpoenaed his financials. My breath caught. "It's happening." "Yes," he said, and then softer. "But Eleanor, this could get dangerous." I looked out the window. A car had been idling across the street for the past hour, headlights off, engine humming. It already is. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. My heart stuttered as I picked it up. Inside, a single line written in his familiar, sharp handwriting. "You think you can destroy me? Remember who made you." I folded it neatly and tucked it into my evidence box. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. Later that day, I wired $5 million from my hidden trust to an elder protection foundation under my new alias. Within a week, the organization launched a campaign exposing the rising epidemic of financial abuse by family members. They didn't name names, but the timing wasn't lost on anyone. Public sympathy shifted again. Commentators began connecting the dots between the missing mother and the anonymous whistleblower. The cracks in Nathan's armor widened. His company lost investors. His lawyer withdrew from the case. And yet, he kept smiling on camera, insisting everything was a misunderstanding. He'd always been a master liar. But the truth had momentum now. The night before the hearing, Kellen called one last time. "Tomorrow will be the last act," he said. "Be ready." "I've been ready," I said quietly. "He just doesn't know it yet." I hung up, closed the blinds, and whispered into the stillness. "You taught me how to fight, Nathan. You just never imagined I'd use it against you." The second hearing was held on a Wednesday morning, the kind that begins gray and heavy with fog. Ashwood Falls was eerily quiet when I arrived at the courthouse. The flag hung limp in the damp air, and the courthouse clock stuck perpetually at 9:17 seemed almost prophetic. Time was about to stop for Nathan. Inside, the courtroom was packed again, but the energy had changed. Reporters whispered in the gallery, some holding copies of Sarah's article, others scrolling through their phones for updates. The air pulsed with anticipation. Nathan was already there, sitting at the petitioner's table. His once flawless suit looked wrinkled, his collar slightly open, his hair unkempt in a way that spoke of sleepless nights. His lawyer, different this time, leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Kellen met me at the door and handed me a folder. "We've got everything in order. The DOJ confirmation, Dr. Harrow's testimony, the timeline of transfers, and the cherry on top." He tapped the cover. "Public case docket, Brandon Voss, under federal investigation for financial misconduct." I took the folder, my pulse steady. "Then let's end this." The judge entered promptly at 10, his gavel sharp against the wood. "This court will now reconvene to review the petition concerning Mrs. Eleanor Voss." Nathan's lawyer rose first, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Your Honor," he began, "in light of recent media distortions, my client wishes to clarify that his motives remain purely protective. The accusations circulating in the press are unfounded." Kellen stood before the man could finish. "Unfounded? Your Honor, we have here public documentation verifying that Mr. Voss is currently under federal investigation for financial crimes, including identity misuse. The Department of Justice confirmed this as of 48 hours ago." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. The judge held up a hand for silence and gestured for the bailiff to collect the folder. As he read, his expression hardened. "Mr. Voss, are you aware of these proceedings against you?" Nathan's throat bobbed. It's a misunderstanding. My company handles dozens of accounts." Kellen interrupted smoothly. "Including those of deceased individuals and his own mother, Your Honor." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The judge turned his attention to me. "Mrs. Voss, do you have anything further to present?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing. I felt strangely calm, as if every betrayal, every sleepless night, had been preparing me for this moment. I handed him 2 documents, my psychiatric evaluation and a notarized log of every phone call, transaction, and medical appointment since my escape from Cedar Vale. "All of this," I said evenly, "was done of my own free will, with legal counsel present. The only confusion here is how a son could claim guardianship over a woman who's been more lucid than he's ever been honest." Laughter murmured quietly from the back row before the judge silenced it with a look. Kellen called our final witness, Dr. Lila Harrow. She entered in a beige suit, her calm presence commanding instant attention. "I met with Mrs. Voss for 3 hours," she said clearly. "Her cognitive function, emotional stability, and logical reasoning are not only intact, they're exceptional. In my professional opinion, there is no basis, medical or ethical, for this petition." The judge nodded. When it was Nathan's turn, he stood, his confidence cracked, his charm frayed. "Your Honor," he began, voice unsteady, My mother is being manipulated. She's not well. She's clearly— Enough, the judge said, his tone final. You've made your case, Mr. Voss, and you've been found wanting. The room went still. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the public record, he continued. This petition is dismissed. All financial and personal authority is restored to Mrs. Voss, effective immediately. The gavel struck once. Nathan froze. His jaw flexed, eyes darting toward me, rage and disbelief tangled together. For years, I had been the quiet shadow orbiting his ambition. Now, he was the one standing in my shadow. I gathered my papers, met his stare, and said softly, "You taught me everything I needed to survive your lies. I suppose I should thank you." As I walked past him, he hissed, "You think this saves you? You have no idea what's coming." I didn't stop. Neither do you. Outside, the courthouse steps were alive with cameras and questions, voices shouting over one another. "Mrs. Voss, how does it feel to win? Do you plan to press charges? Is it true your son's under investigation?" I raised my hand, silencing them all. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here for justice. And for every mother who's ever been told she's too old, too emotional, or too confused to be believed." They applauded, though I didn't need it. The real victory wasn't noise, it was clarity. That evening, I sat by the window of my small home, the mountains bathed in orange light. I poured a cup of tea and watched the fog lift from the valley, just as the fog had finally lifted from my life. Nathan's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "You think this saves you?" No, I thought. It didn't save me. It freed me. The next morning, the world woke up with my name on its lips, not because I'd wanted it, but because Nathan had made me famous. The headline on the Chronicle read, "Mother declared mentally fit son under federal investigation." By noon, it had spread everywhere. My inbox flooded with messages from strangers, some offering support, others sharing stories that mirrored mine. Abandoned parents, silenced mothers, siblings fighting over wills. The kind of stories no one wants to talk about until it's too late. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat by the window, tea in hand, watching the fog dissolve into sunlight over the valley. The quiet outside was beautiful, fragile like peace standing on a fault line. At 11 sharp, my phone buzzed. "Kellen, they've moved fast," he said. "The Department of Justice officially opened a case. Nathan's name is on the docket. Wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and that's just the start." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to the sound of his voice, calm and deliberate. "This is where it gets messy," he continued. "He'll deny everything. He'll paint himself as the victim again. You'll be dragged into it, whether you speak or not." "I've been dragged through worse," I said quietly. "I'm not afraid of truth." Kellen's voice softened. "No, you're not. But remember, truth doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it provokes the guilty." That night, I turned on the television for the first time since the verdict. Nathan was on screen, standing outside his office, swarmed by reporters. He looked thinner, paler, that easy charm now replaced by something brittle. "My mother's been manipulated," he said, eyes glassy. "She's not well. I'm praying for her. I just hope whoever's influencing her will stop before more damage is done." The word manipulated cut through me like a blade. He was still performing, still lying. But I didn't feel anger anymore. Only an odd, hollow pity. I switched off the TV and went to my desk. I opened the drawer, pulled out my notebook, the same one filled with names and dates, and began writing again. The truth isn't loud. It waits. It watches. And when it arrives, it doesn't need to scream. It simply ends the lie. The next morning, a white envelope arrived, this time from the Chronicle. Inside was a handwritten note from Sarah Keene. "Your story is changing lives. If you're ready to speak publicly, I'll be waiting." I stared at the note for a long while. Speaking publicly meant stepping out of hiding. It meant giving up anonymity. It meant owning everything, the pain, the betrayal, the survival. I called Kellen. "It's time." "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Let's stop whispering." The interview was scheduled for Friday. National broadcast. No aliases, no disguises, no filters. Just me. That day, I wore a simple gray sweater, no makeup, no jewelry. The studio was quiet except for the hum of cameras and the soft click of microphones being tested. Sarah sat across from me, her eyes kind but unflinching. She leaned forward. Eleanor, the world knows the headlines, but what they don't know is why you're here. Why now? I looked directly into the camera. Because silence protects the wrong people, I said. Because love without honesty isn't love, it's control. And because no one should have to lose their voice to prove they're still alive. Sarah didn't interrupt. She just let me speak. I told her everything. Cedar Vale. The forged documents. The power of attorney. The fake diagnosis. The escape. The truth. I didn't cry. My voice didn't shake. I just told it the way it was, plain, deliberate, unembellished truth. When the interview aired that evening, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People wept. They raged. They called their parents. They called their lawyers. They shared my story like a prayer. I wasn't just Eleanor Voss anymore. I was a mirror reflecting the faces of 1,000 others who'd been told they were too old, too broken, too quiet to matter. 2 days later, Nathan's company was raided. The news showed boxes of seized files, agents walking through his marble office, flashing cameras catching his expression pale, defeated, and utterly alone. He was out on bail within hours, of course. Money still buys time, but the damage was done. His investors vanished. His wife filed for divorce. His perfect image crumbled. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply closed my notebook and whispered, "It's over." But it wasn't. Because justice isn't just punishment. It's what comes after when you have to learn how to live again without hate to keep you warm. That evening, I opened my laptop and began drafting the paperwork for something new, a foundation. I called it the Eleanor Project. Its mission was simple: protect elders from financial and emotional abuse, provide legal aid, restore dignity, give them back their voices. As I typed, I thought of Maya and Kellen, the 2 people who'd seen me when no one else did. I thought of the other residents at Cedar Vale, still sitting in that gray hallway, waiting for someone to call their name. And for the first time since the day Nathan left me there, I smiled, a real one this time. He had tried to silence me. Instead, he gave me a voice powerful enough to shake the walls of the world. Weeks passed, but the storm didn't fade, it changed direction. The story had gone global now. My name was everywhere: elder rights advocate, whistleblower, survivor. The calls came from journalists, from law students, from women my age who whispered into the phone, "You said what I couldn't." But I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a woman who'd been pushed too far to stay quiet. The Eleanor Project grew faster than I'd imagined. Donations poured in, some from people who'd never met me, others from those who said they'd been waiting for a cause like this. Kellen handled the legal structure. Maya took a leave from Cedar Vale and became the foundation's outreach coordinator. Watching her speak on behalf of residents, so fierce and graceful, filled me with something close to pride. "You built this," she told me one night, as we reviewed applications at my kitchen table. I shook my head. "No, we built this. Every woman who was told to be quiet built this." Outside, the mountain wind howled, carrying with it the smell of pine and rain. Somewhere below, the town lights of Ashwood Falls flickered like a constellation. But even as I began to rebuild something that felt like purpose, Nathan's shadow lingered. He had gone silent since the raid. No interviews, no public appearances. I should have felt relief, but silence from him was never peace, it was calculation. Then, one evening, it came. I was folding laundry when I heard the soft scrape of paper under the front door. I froze. The sound was small, deliberate. When I opened the door, there was no one outside, only the wind sighing through the trees. On the floor lay a single envelope. No name, no address. Inside, a photograph. It was me on my 60th birthday, sitting at the old dining table, laughing, cake knife in hand. Nathan beside me, leaning close, his face caught mid-laughter. We looked like joy personified, like love before the poison. On the back of the photo, written in his precise, slanted handwriting, were 5 words: "You always believed in me." I sank into the nearest chair, the photo trembling between my fingers. For the first time in months, tears came not from fear, but from grief. Grief for the boy who'd once been good. Grief for the mother who'd believed too much. He was right, in a way. I had believed in him. Too much, for too long. I'd mistaken my own endurance for faith. I watched the fire in the hearth flicker, the orange glow dancing across the photograph, softening our faces until they looked like ghosts. Then I fed the photo to the flames. The paper curled, blackened, vanished. "I do still believe in you," I whispered to the ashes. "I believe you'll face the truth someday, but not because I forgive you, because you have no choice left." The following morning, Kellen called. He took the plea. My throat tightened. 10 years? 10 years, he confirmed. Wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. He'll serve most of it, given the scope of evidence. He tried to send a statement of remorse to the press, but it fell flat. People don't believe him anymore. I looked out the window at the morning fog curling through the trees. He never learned that words only matter when they're true. Kellen paused. He asked if you'd accept a letter. "No," I said. "Not now, maybe not ever." There was a silence on the line before he said quietly, "Then this is the end." "Not quite," I murmured. The end would be letting him define me again. That afternoon, I drove back to Cedar Vale for the first time since the day I escaped. The drive through the mountains felt surreal, like moving backward through time, returning to the place where I'd been buried alive, only to prove I was still breathing. When I walked through the front doors, the air smelled different. Clean, lively. The walls were newly painted, and the common room had fresh books and laughter spilling out from the residents. Maya met me by the entrance, her smile bright and tearful. "We've been waiting for you." I followed her into a small gathering room filled with people, nurses, residents, even the new director. They'd prepared a modest banner. "Welcome back, Eleanor." "Ruby, no." Maya introduced me like I was someone important. This woman reminded us that being old doesn't mean being silent. That care should never mean control. I stepped up to the podium, my hands shaking not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had brought me here. "I'm not here because I'm rich," I began softly. "And I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I refuse to be forgotten." I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people who'd spent years believing their voices no longer mattered. "You are not a burden, you are not finished, and you are not alone anymore." Applause started softly, then grew louder, warmer, filling the sterile air with something human and alive. When it was over, Maya hugged me tight. "You changed everything," she whispered. I smiled. "No. I just stopped letting people decide who I was." That night, back at home, I wrote letters to the people who'd stood beside me, Maya, Kellen, Dr. Harrow, even Sarah. I thanked them not for saving me, but for standing with me while I saved myself. And then, on the first snow of January, I wrote one last letter addressed to me. "Dear Eleanor, you weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved deeply in a world that mistook love for obedience. You found your voice, and when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I'm proud of you. With love, yourself." I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel above the quiet fire. The clock ticked softly in the corner, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly free. Outside, the snow fell thick and slow, erasing every footprint, every trace of where I'd been, but not who I had become. "They tried to bury me," I whispered into the glow of the embers, "but they didn't know I was the seed.